While sitting with an older woman in the dining car one day, she commented that her vacation begins the minute she gets on the train, that the process is a joy rather than a wait. I was able to relate, finding much comfort in the days spent looking out the window and without the responsibilities of life tugging at me. The value of getting away from a ringing telephone can never be overstated.
I got interested in the trains because of my mother. She'd worked on the railroad during World War II and would tell the stories.
The train is a different and romantic experience, tugging at our heartstrings in a way that other forms of transit fail to. Many people develop a bit of a crush on their first train experience, remembering it longingly.
I took the Coast Starlight, and that was actually one of my favorite Christmas trips ever.
I take frequent trips to Chicago, and we've taken trips to Denver and Boston.
It was wonderful. The crew was fabulous. They were helpful, polite. The train was just amazing.
The scenery from a train is a unique spectacle, illuminating preserved pieces of nature, small towns, abandoned decay, mountain passes, and people's backyards. Things that have been seemingly untouched since the 19th century when most of these lines were built.
And you're seeing like things that nobody ever sees, and then you go through a town and it's just weird to see even like a street from the perspective of the cars stopped.
Like it's not following an interstate highway. It's going through all these towns that basically, like, if you didn't have a car, didn't want to drive, that's going to be the only way to get from place to place, from like Havre, Montana to Wolf Point or to Willis in North Dakota and stuff like that. All these really small towns in the upper plains that's the only service. Like flying anywhere, it's like there's no major airports in that part of the world.
It's a little scary sometimes, like knowing that you're so far from anything. You're just in the middle of fields or mountains.
One thing I really enjoy about the train is that it's steady, like there's no, like on the bus, acceleration, deceleration, braking here, taking a turn here. On a train, you don't really feel that you're in a vehicle.
And this train has been very comfortable because I was experiencing back trouble on the vacation in the car, and I have not had it since I've been back on the train.
You can sleep if you want, you can read. It's not like the ride is not going to get in the way of doing something else.
I guess for myself, I look at it as a time to kind of get away from the hectic pace and to slow down a little bit. And again, enjoy the fact of getting from point A to point B.
And like I've talked to people and I encourage people like to take the train. Like, why don't you take the train down to the Bay Area? And like, how long is it going to take? It's like, it's about 12 to 16 hours. Like, oh, that's too long. I'll fly instead. Like, we need to get there in less than 2 hours. We need to get there in less than 4 hours. Like, why do we need to get there always so fast? Why has this become such an obsession? Why can't being the traveling to be part of the experience? And I think that's the thing, is people have gotten to the point where traveling isn't really the experience anymore. It's just a way of getting to point A to point B.
In addition to appreciating the experience, real connections are made on trains. The most extreme example being Bill and Nancy Curran, a couple I ate dinner with on the train who had met on the same line 43 years prior.
And I was going back to the Twin Cities, and I happened to be sitting in the coach with a young boy who was also going to the Twin Cities. He was about 10 years old, and I remember he had a huge lunch. I was kind of envious because I didn't have as much of a lunch as he did.
I was actually stationed in the Air Force at Grand Forks Air Base, and I was headed down to Milwaukee and Chicago.
And I decided to go in and maybe get a bite to eat. So I went into the dining car.
And I went into the dining car since I was hungry, and I was told by the steward that there was only one seat left in the dining car. And I said, well, I'm only one person and I have one appetite, so I sat down in that seat, and I happened to be next to my wife of now 40 years. So
he started talking to me, and he mentioned how maybe he could see me on his way back from Chicago. But we never did see each other. The reason we really started seeing each other is he sent me a postcard and we started corresponding with each other.
It's a little unusual that you would meet someone on a train and then have, a marriage and 3 kids and 5 grandkids, and all because of a train and a dining car.
I think that's what's fun, is meeting people on the train. You don't meet people that much, even on a bus or on an airplane.
Before 1971, railroads in the United States were privately owned. They were required to offer passenger train travel as well as delivering freight, even though there wasn't much money to be made in this fashion. The railroads didn't mind, as they owned most of the land around the tracks, and this offered a mechanism to increase its value.
Getting into World War II, railroads were still hanging on because of like the restrictions put in place by the federal government on travel. Like the railroads were basically the way that people had to travel. I mean, they were cramped and they're crowded, but like it was just too expensive to drive, and like there was a lot of restrictions on driving.
President Eisenhower probably was the one president who just went full throttle on the highway system.
Eisenhower's cross-country interstate highway system was the largest construction project in the history of the world, costing billions of dollars. Standardization of the interstate highway system in 1956 further reduced rail travel, hurting freight companies. In the late 1960s, the post office stopped using railroads as their primary method of delivering mail. Around the same time, the Penn Central Railroad went bankrupt. It was a combination effort of two of the largest railroads at the time and was the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history.
A lot of railroads were really, because they weren't making any money off passenger rail, they were really looking at ways of getting out of it.
As a tactic for getting out of the passenger rail business and discouraging ridership, train companies cut services and made everything inconvenient. They cut meal service, operated at strange hours, and got rid of first class.
There was no sort of precedent of what to do, and people were really hesitant for the federal government to step in because it's, that would sort of smack of communism or something like that.
It was looking like all rail would be destroyed in the United States if the federal government did not step in. The Federal Association of Railroad Passengers, a lobbying group, created pressure to nationalize the railroad system. However, it was unclear if this was a private or public entity. No one really knew, and its future hangs in the balance while people debate whether or not it should be making money.
I believe the date was May 1st, 1971. That was the last day for most private passenger rail services to run, and that was the first day Amtrak went into effect. If you see the maps of like the day before Amtrak went into effect and the day after Amtrak went into effect, it basically cut like passenger rail service down to like 25% of what it was. They had the option of either paying like a one-time cash payment or paying in equipment, and most of the railroads just paid in equipment, gave a lot of their old rail cars, freight engines and stuff like that.
And at that time they just took cars and engines from all the different railroads and put them together. You might be in a car that was on the Great Northern and it had a Western theme. And then you might go to the cafe car and it happened to come from a railroad out east on the seaboard, and so it would have a seacoast scene.
And this network is basically still the same network we have today, 35 years later.
80% of the population of Canada lives in big and medium-sized cities. So it's a very different kind of population spread. There are geographical factors as to why the United States is not as interested in a rail service.
Yeah, I just think the country has the wrong priorities. I mean, when you look at Europe and the train travel and the intercity travel by bus and rail, and it's all coordinated, you don't need to drive. In other words, you do have an alternative to driving a car.
The United States is a car culture. The big car companies, are here in the United States. So car culture has been adopted a lot earlier here. So it's a lot more ingrained, and it's part of the iconography of America. Like your house, your car, like your family, God. Canada is supporting a publicly funded rail system. It's called Via Rail. And its main corridor is the Windsor, Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, but it also crosses the country from the maritime provinces all the way to the west coast in Vancouver.
How very simple it is to land in a European city and stay the night in a hostel or with friends, and then hop a train and be in another city in a matter of hours, in another country in a matter of hours. It's just amazing.
Young people are brought up with the idea that it's their right to drive a car, which it is, but exclusive of any other transportation. We really need to coordinate our transportation, get a transportation system. We don't have a system. Certain cities have service and others do not.
Cars are too ingrained in American culture for for trains to really pick on until there's a massive higher cost of using cars.
If passenger rail was actually a money-making venture, and if passenger rail could make money, the private freight railroads that started the passenger rail system in this country would not have given it up if they could make money. Capitalism doesn't give up money-making ventures if they don't have to.
I don't know why people in the United States feel that it has to make money. I don't know of any railroad that I've heard of that makes money.
There were 2 lines to get to Vancouver, and they privatized one of them, and actually that line is making money. So it's a bit more geared towards tourists, but this is an example where rail is making money in North America.
I don't know any airline that's built an airport terminal. I don't know any airline that's built the system for flight controllers. In the trucking industry is the same way. They don't build the highways. They pay fees, but it still doesn't cover it.
Whereas in Europe, the train networks have been a lot more extensive for a much longer period of time, and they have the fast trains as well. So that has brought the technology into modern expectations that we have with other technologies like the car and the airplanes. So if in Europe you can ride a train and you're going at 300 kilometers an hour.
Using rail transit is one of the most efficient ways of long distance travel because there's not a lot of friction on steel wheels is one thing, and also you're having 1 or 2 big diesel engines carrying hundreds of people versus several cars carrying one person at a time.
Oil, the black gold of our machine age. Oil to lubricate your car, to heat your home, to drive the wheels of industry. Oil to make gasoline and kerosene, synthetic rubber, useful products almost innumerable.
The thing with the United States, it's more practical to use a car. I mean, there's other reasons why you might not use a car, but there's wide highways, like the interstate highway system is really amazing in the United States. For what it's supposed to do. Of course, for mass transportation, with low pollution, it's not doing the job. But so there's something very convenient that Americans have that Europeans, for example, don't have. But one reason I take the train is that it's actually a low pollution mode of transportation. Gas per mile for a train is 10 times lower than the car, and the car is 10 times lower than the plane. The train is something 100 times less energy consumption than the plane.
The only form of transportation that is more efficient than the train is the bicycle.
We don't really look at air traffic as far as pollution goes. We talk about industry cars, but the airline industry is booming, and there's all these lower capacity planes. So you have all these short trips and thousands and thousands of trips every day. And these planes are spewing gas in the atmosphere, right? It's not on the ground where it seeps up. It's right there in the upper layers where it's the most dangerous.
The president of Amtrak is selected by Congress and the President of the United States. This is a difficult and contentious position due to the fact that the person needs to simultaneously be able to manage the railroad while soliciting funding from Congress. In 1997, Amtrak was told that they were being put on a 5-year plan, at the end of which they needed to be a profit-making venture. They tried to act in accordance with this, but found that no matter of shuffling finances could put them in a position of making a profit.
They decided to bring in this guy, David Gunn. He headed up the New York City Transit, MTA, and the Toronto Transportation Company. He worked with a lot of railroads like Santa Fe and stuff like that. He's sort of what they call in that sort of area, a fix-it man. They send him in to fix problems.
David Gunn, like many before him, approached Congress saying, "We need more funding. We need more lines and better equipment."
Gunn was trying to really fight, especially with the Bush administration, because the Bush administration, Bush can care less about Amtrak. And he had Norman Mineta as the Secretary of Transportation, who can really care less about Amtrak. And there's been this push for a number of years, to sort of break apart Amtrak, to privatize it, or to just get it down to the bare minimum of lines that they feel would be the most profitable and the most useful lines.
After a series of financial disasters, including a new high-speed line in New England that was not properly built, there was pressure on Gunn to break apart the Amtrak system. He firmly refused and insisted that the federal government needed to match the previous year's $1.8 billion subsidy. There was mounting tension with the Bush administration, who sought to create short-term cash flow solutions, while David Gunn was trying to create long-term financial fixes.
late last year is when he sort of got unceremoniously fired without really any explanation, saying, and the reason that I heard was that he wasn't the man that would carry Amtrak to the next level or some bullshit like that, which, you know, what is that supposed to mean? What would really kill off passenger rail is basically, you know, Congress and the federal government just saying bye-bye.
I've had customers ask me, you know, I know that Bush is trying to shut you down. I don't think it's honestly Bush himself specifically. To my understanding, it's been for the past few years, the administration has been trying to cut the budget.
And even know that its federal budget is barely about $1 billion a year, and then when you look at like sort of like the interstate highways and all that, that's like 1 to 2% of like the actual like transit. Subsidy is a dirty word with a lot of people. They look at Amtrak as sort of being a poster boy of subsidy. We're just throwing money at this thing and it's not getting any better. Why are we even bothering throwing money at this? Like, you know, we shouldn't do that.
But there are a lot of lobbying groups out there to definitely keep us up and afloat. And there's a lot of ridership support as well.
Everybody's talking about peak oil and how, you know, it's not here for long and we really need like air pollution, global warming, all these things. And like the answer is riding trains, like having more passenger rail service. Like that would be an easy way. I mean, the track's already there. It's not really that hard to put another train or two a day on these things, but you need the money and you also need the cooperation of the freight railroads.
I think it's going to be really discouraging if this is always the question, how much longer are we going to have Amtrak?
I mean, that just makes me want to kind of take a trip like right away before they're gone.
And that we live in a great country that's big. It's got a lot of different things in it that you'll never see if all you get from like West Coast to East Coast or from Midwest to South is flying. All you're going to see flying is clouds mostly, and maybe a little bit of stuff on the ground, but you're not ever really going to actually experience being in the landscape.
We have a wonderful marriage and wonderful family, and it all goes back to the train. We've been on the right track ever since, I guess you could say.
Riding on the city of New Orleans, Illinois Central, Monday morning rail. 15 cars and 15 restless riders, 3 conductors, 25 sacks of mail. Along the southbound Odyssey, the train pulls out of Kankakee and rolls along past houses, farms, and fields. Passing trains that have no names, freight yards full of old black men, and the graveyards of the rusted automobiles. Good morning, America, how are ya? Say, don't you know me? I'm your native son. I'm the train they call the city of New Orleans. I'll be gone 500 miles when the day is done. Nighttime on the city of New Orleans, changing cars in Memphis, Tennessee. Halfway home, we'll be there by morning, through the Mississippi darkness, rolling down to the sea. But all the towns and people seem to fade into a bad train, and steel rails still ain't heard the news. The conductor sings his songs again, the passengers will please refrain. This train gonna disappear in railroad.
Chill out, everybody.
America, how are ya? Say, don't you know me?